for the lighting. And we saw different, most of the fuels that we listed, the Mishnah had listed 6 fuels that we can't use. The Mishnah in the beginning of Bama Madlikin had listed 6 fuels that we can't use. And most of them had the same reason. I think 5 out of 6 had the reason because those fuels, the wick does not draw the oil from those fuels properly, right? The makeup of the oil is not a good makeup that the wick is able to draw it properly, right? That's what we said. And if the wick doesn't draw the oil properly, so there's a concern that the person on Shabbat might go ahead and adjust it. He might forget to see that it's not the oil is not working well. Therefore, if the oil doesn't draw well to the wick won't light properly, might be getting dim, and he might come to move it. And that's a big sin on Shabbat, to take a lantern and to move it, to light a fire, and that's called like lighting, increasing the fire on Shabbat is a sin. That's one of the things on Shabbat. If we want to keep food hot on Shabbat, what we do is we place the food on a blech, we have this hot thing, and one of the things is that by having it on that fire, that's going to remind us that not to come to on this plate, not to come to do anything, not to raise the temperature of the fire. We cover the fires with that. So that's going to help us protect. Some people actually cover the knobs. Some people have that blech that actually covers the knobs. Good morning, Ralph. You see some people when they have the cholent, the crock pot, sometimes when they cover the knobs to make sure people shouldn't come to forget, morning, Ralph, and raise the temperature of the item on Shabbat. Morning, Ralph. Good to see you.
Morning, Rabbi.
We are on 26A2. 26A2, first column, Gufa. Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Rav Shimon ben Elazar says, Ein madlikin b'tzari. He says you can't use balsam oil for the Shabbat candles, or the Shabbat wick. You can't use that oil. Now, we stated earlier, because it's a very flammable type of oil, it moves, meaning the fuel inside must probably, it's so flammable that when that oil gives out the gas, or whatever you call it, the gases, the makeup of that oil, good morning, Ronnie, morning, it's very flammable, and it go ahead and it goes into the air, oil, and then and you have a fire, and that good morning, Ronnie, that could go ahead and light up the house. So we said it's a danger to use this balsam oil. We also said that there's a different problem. See, they say over here about the balsam oil. They said, that it is volatile.
It just went over there. Right. It'll come back out.
It flies up. And we said a different reason about the balsam oil that you can't use is because maybe you might it has a very nice aroma. It's a very nice smell, and you might come to take from it on the Shabbat. And the problem is that if this is part of the oil that's being used for the light, if you take out some of the light that's connected to the wick, if you take out some of the oil, that diminishes the fire. and therefore that will be a problem of machabed on Shabbat. You're not allowed to make a fire on Shabbat, now take away a fire on Shabbat. So those are the two reasons that we saw beforehand why you can't use the balsam oil. So now comes the Gemara and goes back to this Braita that we stated in the name of Shimon Elazar. Again, Gufa of Shimon Elazar Omer. Shimon Elazar says, we quoted this earlier, Ein Malikim Mitzari. You can't use this balsam oil. Now the Gemara adds, V'chein hoyer of Shimon Elazar Omer, and according to Wamshat Rashi, good morning, Simon. Shimon Elazar said, he explains, what is sari? Sari ina ela sraf ma'atzeh haktaf. Sari is the sap that comes from a tree that's called the atzeh kataf tree, and the sap that they make from that sap, they use it as the oil, as a fuel. And he says you can't use the sap from, it's interesting, even the word saraf. You notice the English saraf, the first letter of saraf is a S sound, and the last letter of saraf is a P sound, and in English they call it sap. How do you like that, Adam? You see that? The word saraf, you have an S and a P, not S&P 500. You have an S and P, and it's sap. It's the saraf. It's the sap of the tree. And Rabbi Shimon Elazar says you can't use. He identifies what is the saraf. What is this? What is this sari? The sari is the sap of the atzeh kataf tree. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shmuel Omer. Rabbi Shmuel says, Kol hayotzei min ha'etz. He says, anything that comes out from a tree, like the sap of a tree, ein madlikin bo. You can't use as fuel because it does not draw well. Good morning. Good to see you. Good tov. You can't use things that come out of the tree itself because these items don't draw well. The wick is not able to draw this oil well. Simon, if you put this wick into this material, this balsam oil or anything that comes out of the tree, the Gemara is now saying, similar to the sap, and meaning whether it's sap from the kataf tree, which is the tsari, the balsam is a specific type of tree, or even if it's not from a kataf tree, even if it's not balsam oil, any other sap you can't use because it does not draw well. The wick doesn't draw it well. Now, Rabbi Shmuel ben Baruch Omer, Rabbi Shmuel ben Baruch says, "Ein madlikin ela biyotzei min hapri." And Shabbat, the oils that you use, the fuel that you use for your Shabbat, candelabra, so to speak, lantern, has to be something that comes out from a fruit. Meaning to say, he's excluding fish oil. Fish oil you can't use, and also the sap you can't use, or the sari sap you can't use. The sari you can't use that comes from a tree. It's not from a fruit. Tar you can't use. These items you can't use as for Shabbat.
And where's balsam oil coming from? A tree?
Right. Balsam oil comes from a certain tree. It's called the atzeh kataf tree. Now, Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Shmuel is excluding fish oil, like we said, tar, balsam, and comes Rabbi Tarfon Omer. And by the way, Rabbi Yishmael only excluded things that come from a tree, right? So Rabbi Shmuel seemed not to eat, was not excluding fish oil, right? Rabbi Shmuel did not seem to exclude fish oil. Um, Rabbi Shmuel just seems to exclude, good morning, Emmanuel. Rabbi Shmuel just seems to exclude things that come out from the tree. But Rabbi Shmuel ben Baroka extended it. He said he was much more specific. It has to come from a fruit. Maybe a thing from a fruit. Maybe it's much more. The texture is different. It draws the wick could draw much better than something that comes out from other types of materials. As we know, olive oil comes from a fruit. A lot of other oils that come from fruit. However, Rabbi Tarfon says he has a much stricter position. Ein madlikin el b'shemen zayit b'vad. The only type of oil that you could use is olive oil. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, morning Joseph. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri aragla. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri stood up, which seems to be when you stand up, it's like he's like standing up and making a big statement. He said, Ma yasu anshi Bavel. What are the people from Babylon, Bavel? You know, the Gemara is called Talmud Bavli, because it was the main rabbis are from Bavel. There's something called the Talmud Yerushalmi, something called the Jerusalem Talmud. So Ma yaseh anshi Bavel. She'en lehem ela shemen shum shemin. They only have sesame seed oil. Since they only have sesame seed oil, what are they going to do? If you're telling me that the only thing you could use is olive oil, and perhaps the reason why he says olive oil is because similar to the Beit HaMikdash, the Beit HaMikdash was olive oil, so maybe perhaps he felt that Shabbat also you should use olive oil, and part of the reason why, and olive oil is it gives a very clear light, it's a beautiful light, and maybe that's why he felt that it has to be specifically made from that. That's the material that has to be used for the Shabbat lights. However, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri stands up and he says, no. What are the people in Bavel going to do? They don't have olive oil in Bavel. It's not like the society today that you can get oils from all over the world here in New York. But in certain countries, not every place import it. And therefore, if you're in Bavel, the only oil you want to go to the market in Bavel, you want to buy oil, it's sesame seed oil. Mayas Anshi Modai, people who live in Modai, goes and they have walnut oil. That's the oil that they had in Modai. And we'll call it nut oil. They only had nut oil. Mayas Anshi Alexandria. Alexandria was the big, it might have been the capital of Egypt in the old days. They only have like radish oil. Mayas Anshi Kaputkia. The Putkia people. The only thing they have is the neft oil. So what are everybody gonna do? If you're telling me that the only oil that you could use is olive oil, but that's gonna be a very big hardship, and how are they gonna fill the mitzvah? And I presume behind his statement, he's really saying that the rabbis would not have made the rabbis never make any law, institute any enactment that the people can't handle. It's too much for the people. Most of the people can follow it. If it's too hard, they will not make such an enactment. So he's saying it can't be, that's what I would say, it can't be that the rabbis made this enactment that you have to use only olive oil. Could be that olive oil is the best, mitzvah men mufcha, it's the most ideal, but the most ideal doesn't mean it's all or nothing. That's only that, right? So therefore, that's what he says. Ela ein lecha ela mashem chachamim. And also he wants a proof from another point. We have the Mishnah, and we have certain Mishnayot, certain Braitot that tell us you can't use this oil, you can't use that oil, right? This oil has this problem, that oil has that problem. If it's true that the only oil you could use is olive oil, so what's the rabbis telling us? You can't use this because of that, can't use that. Just tell me only oil you can use is olive oil. Everything else is a no. It's a no. You can't use. If you're telling me that can't use this for that reason. This is volatile. This is that. It's obvious that there are many oils that you could use, except there are specific oils, certain oils that you can't use. It's also perhaps you could suggest the only oils that you can't use, like the Mishnah stated. Our Mishnah has 6 oils. The Mishnah stated and this is 6 wicks that you can't use and 6 oils that you can't use. Only what the rabbi says, only what the rabbi said, the ones the rabbi said you can't use. Now, this might be a questionable oil, meaning I said the only things that you can't use, but the rabbi said that you can't use. Now you're going to ask me, is fish oil part of those things that the rabbi said you can't use? We have a rabbi that went on record that says it has to come from a fruit. Fish oil won't be good. And this rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, disagrees. He says, Umad likin b'shemen dagim. You could use fish oil. Bitron, and he also said you could use tar as if it's from the tar, you could use it. It's from the pitch family. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer, Shimon Shazuri says, I want you to know that you can use shemen pakot. You could use shemen pakot. Now, what is shemen pakot? We said earlier, shemen pakot, we had on Chav Dal and Base 24b, note 18, said what it was. It says that it's this oil comes from the melon family, the gourd family, closely related to watermelon. These seeds produce oil that is edible. It can be used for lighting purposes. So he says you could use umalikin b'shemen pakol. You could use the shemen pakol. Remember, there was an opinion on record you only can use something that comes from a fruit. Here it says you could use this comes from the seeds, like the watermelon seeds, or something similar to the watermelon. Neft, and he says you could also use the neft oil, which is a matter of question if you could use the neft oil or not. And he said you could use the neft oil.
What about avocado oil? Avocado oil.
Yes, so avocado oil. So if you call that coming out, meaning if we don't have it listed as a problem, we could use it. Reb Simchas Omer, Kol hayotzei min habasar im alikin bo, anything that comes out from flesh, meaning from an animal, like fat. We had the question, the Mishnah earlier, right? You can't use fat as a substance, as an oil. There's an opinion that says if it's cooked, if the fat was cooked, you could use it, right? We had a machloket in the Mishnah whether you could use cooked oil, cooked fat, or not. Nocham Modi Omer, you could use cooked fat. This rabbi says you can't use anything that comes out from an animal, you can't use, or from a living item, from flesh. The only thing that's a not part of the group, only exception to the group is fish oil. And he says you could use fish oil, even though the fish oil comes from fish, which is basar, which is meat, and even though it's meat, meaning it comes from flesh, so to speak, you still have a right to use fish oil. So the Gemara says, okay, Sumcha says you can use fish oil. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he also says you could use fish oil. So what is Sumchis coming? It seems to be saying the same opinion. What is he adding to the table? Meaning when the Gemara brings another opinion, that other opinion is coming to add something that we did not know before, right? If he's saying the same thing, he's agreeing with the Tanakama that said you could use fish oil. So Sumchas Haina Tanakama. Because the Tanakama, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, forbade all oils that were mentioned in the Mishnah that you can't use, and included in that was from the fat. He permits fish oil, so they're both agreeing that you can't use something that comes from flesh, from an animal, whether it's an animal or you call it a fish, part of that family of living items. So what is he coming to say differently? If the Gemara brings him as a new opinion, right? So he's saying something different than we said before. What is he adding? Is that clear? Adam, is that clear? So the Gemara says, Ika beinayu the Rabbuna Marav. The difference is the case of Rabbuna Marav. Rabbuna Marav spoke about when you have fat, and which we said you can't use the fat. Let's say a fat that was melted, it was cooked fat. If you added proper oil to the cooked fat, do we say, remember we had a question, if you add proper oil to the cooked fat, are we afraid that you're going to use that oil or that fat without the good kosher oil mixed in? If you're going to allow people to use fat oil together with proper oil, they might come to use fat oil by itself. That was a question we had earlier. So there was two different opinions on that. So that's exactly where the argument is here. The difference between Sumchis and the first opinion is whether they will allow the addition of good oil to the fat. Meaning to say, if let's say the Tanakama, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he went ahead and he said, you can't use what the Mishnah says you can't use, right? When the Mishnah says you can't use, one of the things the Mishnah says you can't use fat oil. Does that mean he holds, but what about if the fat oil was mixed with some good oil? Maybe he holds you could use it. And therefore, Sumchis does not give that allowance. He only said you can use fish oil, but fat oil doesn't make a difference whether you add something to it or not. That could be the difference between the two opinions. Or it's possible the other way, that the first opinion of the Mishnah says you can't use fat oil would hold you can't use fat oil, whether there's some fat, whether it's mixed with good oil or not mixed with good oil. The Sumchas says if it would be mixed with good oil, then you could use it. It's not clear which one would be allowed, the fat oil mixed with good oil, or which one would say you can't use it. But that would be the difference. That case, when you have the fat oil mixed with some good stuff, that would be the difference. And that's where the Ika Beinaya Rabbuna Marav. And therefore, it is not, they're not saying the same thing. They are arguing. There's an argument here between Sumches and the other opinion. In Bama Metzia, you have Sumches. The Rabbi Sumches comes up. You'll see in Bama Metzia his name. Okay, now the Gemara continues. A new point in the Gemara. Tanya. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, now we're turning the page. We are now 26A3. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Kol hayotzei min ha'etz. Anything that comes out from a tree, anything that comes out, let's say like canvas or cotton. Now, ein bo mishum shalosh al shalosh. It's not subject to the laws of 3 fingers by 3 fingers. Let's say this is a finger, right? 3 fingers, you put 3 fingers next to each other. It's not subject to that law. What do we mean? There's certain laws called tumah, contamination, right? We have the concept that, a person could become contaminated, right? A person goes to a cemetery, a person goes to a funeral, is under the canopy of a dead body, in the same room, they become tameh, right? Morning asaf. And therefore he has to go, he needs the ashes of the paraduma. There's a certain process that needs to be done in order to purify oneself. What about, if a person comes in contact with a dead animal, certain dead animal, right? Dead animal, a dead carcass has the ability to make a person contaminated. And there's also these shmona shotzim, 8 teeming animals, like some translate a mouse as one of them, that have the ability to contaminate somebody if someone comes in contact when they're dead. If these animals touch a person, touch a garment, the garment could become contaminated. And if that garment becomes contaminated, let's say if that garment now can't touch truma, you're not allowed to touch truma with a contaminated garment, because that contaminated garment has the ability to make something else tameh. That garment could make kachim, parts of a sacrifice, contaminated, and therefore you have it's subject to certain laws of contamination. So there is a law that there has to be a certain size for an item to be, let's say, take this, right? It has a certain size, right? Let's say it equals a little more than 3 fingers by 3 fingers. It could be used as a patch. So maybe even something that's half the size. But let's say, but if something is so minimal, if you have a little piece of cloth, and the cloth is, let's say, this size, which is not 3 fingers by 3 fingers, it cannot receive contamination. It's too small. It's not something that's an item that's significant. It's a type of size of something people would throw out in the garbage, that people don't keep those small pieces, what do you call it? Pieces of material, like, that are very small, scraps. It's a scrap type of material, right, Simon? And the scrap people just throw out in the garbage, and it's not susceptible to contamination. So, however, when it comes to if it's wool or whether it's linen, so even if it's only these 3 fingers by 3 fingers, which is a small size, again, but it's still 3 fingers by 3 fingers, right? 3 fingers this way and 3 fingers the other way, length and width. That's already considered the size of a material. Like I said, a patch, so that people go ahead and would they have between 2 to 2. A width of a finger is between 2 and 2.4 centimeters, they say over here. Okay, so it has the ability to receive contamination if it's 3 fingers by 3 fingers. However, that's if it's wool or linen. But if the material is canvas or cotton, so this Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, if it's canvas or cotton material, it's not the same significant type of material like wool and linen. Therefore, that will not become contaminated the size of 3 fingers by 3 fingers. The Gemara is going to discuss, would it receive contamination if it's 3 tfachim by 3 tfachim? It's around 3 fists by 3 fists. would it be receive contamination if it's 11 inches by 11 inches? Would that size, which is much larger, would it receive contamination? Or because it's not cotton or cotton, because it's not wool or linen, which is semi pishtim, maybe it's not going to receive contamination at all. Meaning this type of material. So that we're going to see in the Gemara. It's going to be a whole discussion. But what is clear, he says, if it's the law of 3 fingers by 3 fingers that has the ability to receive contamination does not apply something that comes out from a tree, like canvas and cotton. And utensils, when you could have a spoon, a small spoon, something that could hold something. That's we're not talking about that. That's a different that if it could hold something, that's very significant, even if it's not 3 fingers by 3 fingers. This is talking about a cloth, a garment material, something that we're talking about garments. Now, the Gemara later on is going to say that he's talking about all types of garments that are not made of wool and linen. Let's say you make garments from the feathers of goats. He's not only referring to things that come out of a tree. His law that it says anything that comes out of a tree is not susceptible to the law of 3 fingers by 3 fingers is not specific by a tree. It also would apply. He means to say anything that's not wool and linen is not susceptible. Therefore, the feathers of a goat don't come out from a tree, but it's not wool or linen. And therefore, it will not be subject to the law of 3 fingers by 3 fingers. That's point 1. Now, based on point 1, halacha number 1 comes halacha number 2. If you recall, we learned Masechta Sukkah last year. We learned Sukkah. And what you need to use for schach of the Sukkah, we said the certain halachot, it has to come from the ground, has to have originated from the ground. It can't be attached to the ground. It has to be detached from the ground. But it has to have originated from the ground, like the bamboo sticks that we use. It originated from the ground. Besides that, it cannot be something that receives contamination, right? If you made the bamboo sticks in a way and you made a nice little raft out of it, right? You made it into a whole utensil to use for personal use, then it would receive contamination. And therefore you will not be able to use it for the sukkah. So the sukkah material that you use for schach to cover the sukkah on Sukkot has to have originated from the ground, no longer attached to the ground, and does not have the ability to receive contamination. Meaning if that dead mouse would touch the schach, would touch the bamboo stick, it will not make the bamboo stick contaminated. That's the, therefore the mats that they use for schach, there's a hechsher. They give a hechsher, is a supervising agency saying it's kosher for sukkah, but they make sure that they make it in a way that it's not subject to contamination. Right, it might be for that, correct, and it might also, the way they made it, it was never made as a mat for people to lay on and to sleep on, because then it gets into the issue of receiving contamination. It was made for some sort of covering of a hut or something like that. It's not subject to. It was made specifically for for certain, the way it's made, the intention how it's made makes a big difference whether something is received contamination or not. So therefore, that's part of that's the idea. That's why you have to make sure if you're buying mats. If you're not buying mats, you want to just buy regular. You get bamboo. You don't need any supervision on the bamboo sticks that you go buy. Or if you go ahead and you take branches of a tree that were cut and you throw it on top of your sukkah, you ever see some people use the branches of a tree, you don't need supervision, you don't need any hashgacha saying that it's kosher for schach. It's it's obvious it's kosher for schach. But once you get into the mats, now you're getting into there's a rope. It's tied to or maybe they don't use rope. They use material from the mats itself. However, because they get into issues with rope, because maybe it might be metaboltum or receive contamination. Like you said, other materials that it's made with, you have to be careful when you get into the mats. You know, you see the guy has mats on his schach. If I'll go to Home Depot, buy any mat. Doesn't work that way for the schach, for the cover of the sukkah. Now, so we're saying over here that since it's not mekabel tumah, since we're saying now cotton came from the ground, right? And therefore, in this canvas, we're talking about it came from, I think, maybe from a flax plant or something, something similar to the flax plant. I don't remember, what it's made from. If you look up what is canvas made from, but it's coming from the ground. It originated, it's a material that came from the ground, which we call gedule kaka, 20 miles. It came from the ground, and that's what you could use for, and it's not, now that you're telling me that this is not mikabel tuma, you're telling me that this material, cotton, this cotton or this canvas is not mikabel tuma. Now, again, it could be it's only because it's up to 11 inches. Could be if it's 11 inches, it would receive contamination. If the size is 11 inches, if it's less than 11 inches by 11 inches, so for sure, what's clear according to this opinion, if this material, this cotton, this canvas is less than 11 inches by 11 inches around, it's not received contamination. If it's already significant, what's already 11 inches by 11 inches, this is more than 11 inches by 11, maybe this might be, it's maybe a little higher, but you understand, once it's 11 inches by 11 inches, then some will say it is receiving contamination, some say it won't receive contamination, but until then, for sure, this opinion holds, you could use this material as schach. You could use this material as schach. In contrast to wool, okay, wool doesn't come from the ground. So therefore, you can't use wool as schach. But linen is flax. Flax, good morning. Flax came from it's a plant, right? It came from the ground, but flax is mekabel tumah. Flax receives contamination. And since flax receives contamination, so therefore it would be a problem to use that flax as if it's 3 fingers by 3 fingers, it would be susceptible to contamination. So, but here he said misaching, meaning misaching about. You could go ahead and use the canvas or the cotton material as schach, chutz mi pishtan. However, pishtan, he says, you can't go ahead and use as meaning, because we say chutz mi pishtan, we said kol hayotze min ha'etz, we said anything that comes from a tree, we said does not subject to the rule of 3 fingers by 3 fingers, we said. Because if it comes from a tree, we said, it's not wool or linen. So it comes from a tree. Again, he said if it comes from a tree, it does not receive contamination of 3 fingers by 3 fingers. But flax is a tree, right? Flax is from a tree product, and therefore flax would be an exception to the rule. Flax, which comes from a tree, it comes from, even though we said generally things from a tree are not mekabel tumah, right? things from a tree like cotton, but 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 flax is an exception. And flax, even though it's from a tree, it would receive contamination, and therefore, since it would receive contamination, you cannot use it as schach, right? If it would be 3 fingers by 3 fingers, you cannot use it as schach. We'll continue tomorrow. We'll go into more details about this opinion. Have a great day, everybody. Good to see Ronnie, Asaf, Emmanuel, Ralph, and everybody on the screen, and everybody that's live here. Thank you so much for joining.
Have a good day, Rabbi.
Good day, you too. Sukkot is around the corner, everybody.
Just thinking that.
A little over 2 months.